Woman spends days in heaven, returns with a prophecy about the end times, NDE. What do you think this prophecy is? To find out, watch the video to the end. But first, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get more stories like this. The moment Sarah opened her eyes, she knew something was different. She wasn't in the hospital anymore. The pain that had racked her body was gone. The beeping machines, the sterile smell, the hushed voices of doctors, they had all vanished. Instead, she stood in an open field, bathed in a golden light that seemed to stretch infinitely in every direction. A soft breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers, unlike any she had ever smelled before. The sky was a shade of blue so pure it almost didn't seem real. She felt weightless, as if she were floating just above the ground, yet she could feel the warmth of the earth beneath her feet. Was this a dream? A hallucination? Or was this... Sarah took a deep breath, and suddenly she heard a voice. Not just any voice, a voice that resonated deep within her soul. "You are not dreaming, Sarah." She turned quickly, and before her stood a figure unlike any she had ever seen. He radiated light, his form almost too brilliant to gaze upon. Though his features were not entirely clear, Sarah could sense deep wisdom and kindness in his presence. "Where am I?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "You are in the space between," the figure said gently. "Between life and eternity." Sarah's heart pounded. "Am I dead?" The figure regarded her with a gaze so powerful it seemed to peer into the depths of her soul. "Your time has not yet come, but you have been brought here for a reason." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes as memories of her final moments on Earth flooded her mind. She had been lying in a hospital bed, struggling to breathe, her family gathered around her. She had felt herself slipping away, the weight of death pulling at her, until there was only darkness. And then this, "Why am I here?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The figure extended a hand, and as he did, the world around her shifted. The field disappeared, replaced by what looked like a great city of light. Towers gleamed with gold and silver, stretching high into the sky. The streets were paved with what appeared to be glowing crystal, and everywhere, people moved with a sense of joy and purpose. Sarah gasped. "This is the city of the redeemed," the figure explained. "You have been brought here to see what is to come, and what must be shared." Sarah felt an overwhelming peace settle over her. She had no doubt in her mind now, she was in heaven. The figure gestured forward, and Sarah followed him through the luminous streets. The people she passed all had a glow about them, a light that seemed to radiate from within. Some walked alone, others in groups, but every single face shone with a joy that was indescribable. She passed a group of children playing in a fountain, their laughter like music. Further down, an elderly couple sat beneath a tree, their faces filled with a love so deep it was almost tangible. "This is a place without sorrow," the figure said. "A place where every tear has been wiped away." Sarah's heart ached at the thought of leaving. "But," the figure continued, his voice turning solemn, "there is something you must see before you return." The warmth around her suddenly shifted. The light dimmed, and for the first time since she had arrived, Sarah felt a chill. Before her, the city gave way to darkness. She stepped forward hesitantly, the air growing heavy. The bright streets ended abruptly, and beyond them lay a vast expanse of emptiness. It wasn't just the absence of light, it was the absence of everything. A deep, hollow feeling settled in Sarah's chest as she gazed into the void. It stretched endlessly, its depths unreadable. "This," the figure said, "is what awaits those who reject the light." Sarah swallowed hard. Though she saw nothing, she felt something moving in the darkness. Shapes twisted in the void, just out of sight. Faint whispers echoed through the air, whispers of despair, of regret, of souls crying out. Sarah turned to the figure, her voice shaking. I don't want to see this." The figure's gaze was firm. "You must." The darkness deepened, and for a brief moment, Sarah saw them. Shadows, countless in number, writhing as if trapped. They did not speak, but their suffering was undeniable. It was a place of complete separation, a place where the warmth of the city did not reach. She clutched her chest, struggling to breathe. "Why are you showing me this?" she pleaded. Because time is running short, the figure said. There is a great deception upon the earth, and many walk unknowingly toward this fate. Sarah trembled. What am I supposed to do? The figure looked into her eyes, and for the first time, she saw something almost like sadness. You must return, and you must warn them. A rush of wind suddenly engulfed her, the golden city and the darkness fading into nothingness. The next thing she knew, she was gasping for breath. Her eyes flew open, and she was back in her hospital bed. The sounds of beeping monitors filled the air, and her mother let out a choked sob. She's awake. Sarah's awake. A nurse rushed to her bedside, checking her vitals as her father grasped her hand, his eyes filled with relief. Sarah tried to speak, but her throat was dry. It took a moment before she managed to whisper, "I saw heaven." Her mother burst into tears. Sarah's body was weak, but her mind was racing. The images of what she had seen, the city of light, the darkness, the warnings, they were burned into her memory. She knew, without a doubt, that she had to tell the world what she had seen. She had to warn them. The prophecy of the end times had been revealed to her, and time was running out. Sarah lay in her hospital bed, her body weak but her mind ablaze with urgency. The vision of heaven and the abyss still lingered, as vivid as if she were still there. She had been sent back for a reason. She had been given a message, and she had no time to waste. Her mother gripped her hand tightly, her eyes filled with tears of relief. "Sarah, sweetheart, we thought we lost you. The doctors said you had no heartbeat for nearly 3 minutes. 3 minutes. 3 minutes on Earth had felt like an eternity in that other realm." "I saw something," Sarah whispered, her voice hoarse. Her father leaned in, his brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Sarah's mouth felt dry, her throat raw, but she forced herself to speak. "I wasn't gone. I was taken somewhere." Her mother glanced at the doctor standing nearby, concern etched on her face. "She's been through a lot," she murmured, as if Sarah were simply confused. Sarah shook her head weakly. "Oh, please, listen to me. I saw heaven." The room fell silent. Her father exchanged a wary glance with her mother. "Sweetheart, maybe we should." "I saw heaven," Sarah repeated, this time with more strength. "And I saw something else. A darkness so deep, so empty, it was unlike anything I've ever felt." Tears welled in her eyes. "And I was sent back to warn everyone." Her mother placed a gentle hand on her forehead. "Honey, you've been through a lot. You were unconscious for days. Maybe." Sarah expected doubt. She knew people wouldn't believe her at first. But she also knew that those who were meant to hear the message would hear it. And so, she kept writing. A few days later, Sarah was discharged from the hospital. Her body was still weak, but she felt stronger than ever in her purpose. She returned home, where she continued documenting every detail of what she had seen. One evening, as she was going through messages online, she received an email that made her heart stop. "You need to stop sharing this." That was all it said. No sender name. No context. A chill ran down her spine. She showed the email to the nurse, who had since become a close friend. "This could just be a troll," the nurse said carefully. "But something about it feels off." Sarah swallowed hard. "They don't want people to know the truth." The nurse's expression grew serious. "Then that means you need to keep sharing it?" Sarah nodded, her resolve strengthening. She wouldn't stop, no matter the cost. The days passed in a blur. Sarah's message continued spreading, reaching people across the world. Some believed her. Some ridiculed her. Some even sent threats. But she refused to be silenced. Then one night, everything changed. She was sitting on her bed, reading through messages, when her phone rang. An unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello." A deep voice, unfamiliar, spoke on the other end. "You need to stop. This is your final warning." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "Who is this?" The call disconnected. Her hands shook as she set the phone down. Fear crept in, but she forced herself to take a deep breath. She had been in heaven. She had seen the truth. She would not be afraid. She grabbed her journal and turned to a fresh page. "They're trying to stop me. But I won't be silent. This message is bigger than me. I will keep speaking until the world hears the truth. She closed the journal, determination burning in her chest. The end times were near, and she was going to make sure the world was ready. Sarah sat in her dimly lit room, her hands trembling as she reread the message in her journal. The warning call still echoed in her mind. Someone, something, didn't want her to spread the truth. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. She had seen heaven. She had seen the abyss. She had been sent back for a reason. She couldn't stop now. Turning back to her laptop, she opened her social media account and began typing another post. I received a call tonight. Someone told me to stop sharing my experience. But I won't, because I know what I saw. And I know what's coming. I was given this message so that others could prepare before it's too late. The world is being deceived, but there's still time to wake up. She hesitated for a moment before hitting post. Within minutes, comments began flooding in. Sarah, you're so brave. Don't let them silence you. This is chilling. I've had dreams about the same thing. You're scaring people for no reason. Just stop. Keep speaking, Sarah. The world needs to hear this. Sarah exhaled, rubbing her hands together to stop them from shaking. She knew not everyone would believe her, but that didn't matter. Even if she reached just one person who needed to hear this message, it would be worth it. She closed her laptop, exhaustion washing over her. She had barely slept since leaving the hospital, and the weight of everything was starting to take its toll. But as soon as she shut her eyes, the visions returned. She was back in the Golden City, standing before the radiant figure. His eyes, filled with both sorrow and urgency, locked onto hers. You are doing well, but the time is shorter than you realize, he said, his voice firm yet kind. Sarah's heart pounded. What do I need to do next? The figure extended his hand, and suddenly, the city around them shifted. They were no longer in heaven. They stood above the earth, watching as great events unfolded below. Sarah gasped as she saw disasters, storms, fires, earthquakes, all occurring at once. People ran in terror, their faces twisted in panic. But what frightened Sarah the most was the deception. She saw people blindly following something they believed was good, but wasn't. They laughed, they celebrated, completely unaware that they were walking straight into darkness. Sarah's chest tightened. Why can't they see it? They are blinded, the figure said. They do not question what they are being told. They have turned away from the truth. Sarah watched in horror as the earth itself seemed to groan. The sky darkened, and a deep, chilling whisper swept across the land. A voice not from heaven. A voice filled with lies. The people below cheered for it. Sarah clutched her head, shaking. No, they don't understand. They will not understand until it is too late, the figure said solemnly. Unless you help them see. Sarah turned to him, desperation in her voice. But how? How do I wake them up? The figure gazed at her for a long moment before saying, Tell them what you see. And just like that, Sarah woke up. She gasped, sitting up so fast she nearly fell out of bed. Sweat drenched her clothes. Her heart raced. The vision had been clearer than ever. It wasn't just a warning, it was a call to action. Sarah scrambled for her journal, flipping open a blank page and writing down everything she had just seen. The disasters. The deception. The voice in the darkness that people welcomed. She knew now that this wasn't just about what she had already witnessed. It was about what was still to come. She needed to warn them. She reached for her phone and recorded a video. Her hands still shook as she pressed the record button. I just had another vision, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. I was shown the future. Disasters, chaos, and a deception so powerful that people won't even realize they're being led into destruction. She swallowed hard. I don't know exactly when this will happen, but I was told to keep warning people. If you're listening to this, please, don't be blind to what's happening around you. Question everything. Wake up before it's too late. She hit post. The video uploaded instantly, and within minutes, comments poured in. Some people mocked her. Some sent threats. But many believed. She wasn't alone. And that was all she needed to keep going. Over the next few days, Sarah's following grew. More people began reaching out, sharing their own experiences, dreams, visions, signs they had seen but had been too afraid to talk about. But with the growing attention came more resistance. Her accounts were suddenly flagged, her posts removed for misinformation. Some of her followers reported receiving strange messages, warning them to stop engaging with her content. Then, another call came. A known number. Sarah hesitated before answering. "Hello." A distorted voice spoke. "You were told to stop." Sarah's breath hitched. "Who are you?" The pause. "This is bigger than you. If you continue, there will be consequences." The line went dead. Sarah's fingers gripped the phone tightly. Her pulse pounded in her ears. But she wasn't afraid anymore. She had seen heaven. She had been warned of the deception. And no matter what happened, she wouldn't stop sharing the truth. She turned on her camera again. And this time, she had no fear in her voice. "They're trying to silence me. But I will not be silent. I know what I saw," Sarah said firmly, gripping her mother's wrist. "And I can't ignore it." The doctor cleared his throat. "Hallucinations are common after a near-death experience," he said gently. "Your brain was deprived of oxygen and sometimes—" Sarah's frustration mounted. Why wouldn't they believe her? "I wasn't hallucinating," she snapped, her voice raspy but insistent. "I was there. And there's a message I have to share." The doctor sighed. "Perhaps some rest will help. Let's give her time." Sarah's mother nodded, though the worry in her eyes didn't fade. "Of course, doctor. We'll talk about this later, sweetheart." Sarah wanted to scream. There was no time for later. As the doctor left, Sarah's mother kissed her forehead, whispering, "Just rest, my love." But Sarah didn't want to rest. She had just returned from somewhere beyond imagination, and the weight of what she had seen pressed heavily on her. She needed to tell someone who would listen. Later that night, when the hospital was quiet and the lights in her room had dimmed, Sarah found herself staring at the ceiling, replaying every detail of her journey. The warmth of heaven, the joy on the faces of those who lived there, the horror of the abyss, the lost souls trapped in the void. The figure's words echoed in her mind. "Time is running short." A soft knock at the door startled her. She turned her head and saw a nurse standing there, holding a small notepad. "Sarah?" the nurse whispered, stepping inside. Sarah blinked in surprise. "Yes?" The nurse hesitated, then stepped closer. "I heard what you told your family earlier." She clutched the notepad to her chest, her expression filled with something Sarah hadn't expected. "You believe me?" Sarah whispered. The nurse nodded slowly. "I do." Sarah felt a lump rise in her throat. "My grandmother had a near-death experience before she passed," the nurse said, pulling a chair beside the bed. "She told us she had seen heaven, that she had seen angels, streets of gold, and a peace beyond words." Sarah's breath caught. The nurse swallowed hard. She also said she saw something else. Something dark. She warned us that there would be signs before the end, signs people would ignore. Sarah's heart pounded. "That's exactly what I saw." The nurse nodded, opening her notepad. "Tell me everything." And so, for the next hour, Sarah recounted every moment of her journey. The city of light, the endless love and warmth of heaven, and then the dreadful, suffocating darkness beyond it. She spoke of the figures in the abyss, the despair that clung to the very air, the whispers of regret that had reached out to her. And she spoke of the warning. "There's a great deception on earth," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "People are walking blindly into the abyss, and they don't even realize it." The nurse shuddered, gripping her pen. "A deception?" Sarah nodded. "The voice told me that people are being led astray, convinced that nothing exists beyond this world, that there are no consequences for their choices. And by the time they realize the truth, it's too late." The nurse exhaled slowly, her face pale. "Sarah, this is a message that needs to be heard." Sarah gripped her blanket tightly. "But how? No one will believe me. My own family thinks I was hallucinating." The nurse reached for her hand. "They might not believe you now, but some people will." Sarah swallowed hard. "Then I have to make sure the message spreads." The nurse nodded. "And I'll help you." Tears burned in Sarah's eyes. For the first time since she had returned, she didn't feel alone. But she knew this was only the beginning. The real challenge was yet to come. The next morning, Sarah felt a new sense of purpose. She knew that sharing her message would not be easy. People would doubt her, mock her, call her crazy. But she had seen what awaited those who ignored the truth. She would not be silent. The nurse returned before her shift ended, handing Sarah a small journal. "Start writing everything down," she said. "Your memories, your emotions, every detail of what you saw." Sarah took the journal with shaky hands. "If this message is meant to reach the world," the nurse said, "then let's make sure it does." Sarah nodded, a fire igniting in her chest. She had been sent back for a reason, and she would not fail. Sarah's hands trembled as she gripped the journal the nurse had given her. Every detail of her experience in heaven and the abyss was still fresh in her mind, as though she had just woken up from a dream so vivid it was impossible to forget. She clicked the pen and began writing. "I was dead for 3 minutes. 3 minutes in the hospital bed. But in those 3 minutes, I saw eternity. I saw heaven and I saw the abyss. I saw the future of the world, and I was told to come back with a warning. Time is running out. There is a great deception leading people into darkness, and they don't even realize it. I have to share what I saw before it's too late." The words poured out of her, her fingers barely keeping up with the thoughts racing through her mind. She described the streets of heaven, the glowing towers, the people filled with pure joy. Then she wrote about the abyss, the empty, endless void filled with regret and suffering. The suffocating darkness. The chilling realization that the souls there had chosen their path without realizing it until it was too late. Tears blurred her vision as she wrote. The door creaked open, and Sarah's mother stepped inside, carrying a cup of tea. She paused when she saw Sarah feverishly writing. "Sweetheart, what are you doing?" Sarah didn't look up. "I have to write it all down before I forget anything." Her mother sighed and set the tea down on the bedside table. "Sarah, honey, are you sure you're not just remembering a dream?" Sarah clenched the pen in frustration. "It wasn't a dream, Mom." Her mother hesitated. I want you to focus on healing. You've been through something traumatic." Sarah met her mother's gaze. "I died. I crossed over. And I was sent back. You don't have to believe me, but please don't tell me I imagined it." Her mother sighed again, softer this time. "Okay," she said finally. "I won't push. But I worry about you." Sarah softened. "I know." Her mother reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair from Sarah's face. "You need rest, sweetheart." Sarah gave a small nod, though she knew she wouldn't be sleeping anytime soon. After her mother left, Sarah turned back to the journal. She wasn't just writing for herself. She was writing for the world. The next day, Sarah convinced the nurse to help her set up an online account. If she couldn't go out into the world yet, she could bring the message to people through social media. She posted the first part of her story, a brief summary of her near-death experience, the vision of heaven, and the warning about deception. At first, she wasn't sure if anyone would believe her. But within hours, the post began to spread. People commented, some skeptical, others deeply moved. "I had a similar experience after my heart stopped for a few minutes. Heaven is real. This gave me chills. I feel like this message is important." Another religious hallucination. Typical. How can we know you're telling the truth? Sarah's hands were steady now as she turned the camera back on. She was no longer afraid. Whatever forces were trying to stop her from spreading this message only confirmed that it was too important to be silenced. She stared into the lens, her heart pounding with conviction. "If you're watching this, I need you to understand something. I was sent back to warn people. The deception is real. The darkness is coming. And too many people are walking straight into it without even realizing it." She paused, drawing a shaky breath. "I don't care if people call me crazy. I don't care if they try to shut me up. I've seen what's coming, and I refuse to stay silent." She hit post. Within minutes, the video was shared hundreds of times. Her inbox flooded with messages. Some were encouraging. "Sarah, I had the same vision. You're not alone. Thank you for speaking up. I've been having strange dreams about this too, but I was afraid to talk about them." Others were filled with anger and threats. "You're spreading fear. Just stop. This is insane. You need help." If you don't shut up, we'll make sure you do. Sarah inhaled sharply. The threats didn't scare her anymore. But what did scare her was how desperate some people were to silence her. And then it happened. As she refreshed her page, she was met with a message that made her blood run cold. Your account has been permanently banned for violating community guidelines. Sarah's stomach dropped. They had shut her down. She tried to log in again. But her posts? Gone. Everything she had shared, all the messages, all the warnings, erased. She gripped the edge of her desk, her mind racing. They were trying to make sure no one heard the truth. But they had underestimated her. Because Sarah wasn't going to stop. She picked up her phone and called the only person she knew would understand. The phone rang twice before the nurse picked up. Sarah? What's wrong? They banned me, Sarah said, her voice shaking. My account is gone. Everything's gone. The nurse was silent for a moment. Then, in a calm voice, she asked, What do you want to do now? Sarah didn't hesitate. Keep going. The nurse let out a breath, as if relieved by her answer. But then let's make sure they can't stop you. Sarah frowned. What do you mean? I have connections, the nurse said. There are people who believe in these warnings. People who have been trying to spread this message, just like you. Sarah's pulse quickened. How do I reach them? The nurse hesitated. I'll set up a meeting. But Sarah, once you go down this road, there's no turning back. Sarah's grip on the phone tightened. She thought of the golden city, the radiant light, the figure's solemn warning. She thought of the abyss, the lost souls, the chilling whispers. And she thought of the deception, growing stronger by the day. There was never a turning back, she said. This is what I was sent back to do. The nurse was quiet for a moment. Then, finally, she said, I'll call you tomorrow. That night, Sarah barely slept. She felt the weight of everything pressing down on her, but she also felt something else, a strength she hadn't had before. She dreamed again. But this time, the vision was different. She saw people waking up. She saw light pushing back the darkness. And for the first time, she felt something she hadn't in a long time. The battle was just beginning. But she was ready. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, staring at the blank page in her journal. The silence of the early morning surrounded her, broken only by the occasional hum of the refrigerator and the distant chirping of birds outside. She wasn't sure how long she had been sitting there. Waiting. Thinking. Preparing. Everything had changed so quickly. One moment, she was just another person living her life. The next, she was a messenger, tasked with revealing something the world wasn't ready to hear. And now, they were trying to silence her. But she had been to heaven. She had walked the golden streets. She had seen what came next. She wasn't afraid anymore. Her phone vibrated. She picked it up and saw the message from the nurse. Meet me at the address I sent you. They're ready to talk. Sarah's heart pounded as she grabbed her journal and stuffed it into her bag. It was time. The drive to the meeting location was nerve-wracking. Sarah didn't know what to expect. Who were these people? Could she trust them? She pulled up in front of a small church at the edge of town. It was an old building, the kind that looked like it had been standing for a century, its wooden doors worn but sturdy. She hesitated before stepping out of the car. As she walked toward the entrance, the door opened before she could even knock. The nurse stood there, smiling softly. You came? Sarah nodded, clutching her bag tightly. I had to. The nurse motioned for her to follow. Come inside. They've been waiting. Sarah stepped into the dimly lit church, her footsteps echoing against the wooden floor. A few people sat in the pews, some old, some young. All of them turned to look at her as she entered. One of them, an elderly man with kind eyes, spoke first. We know who you are, Sarah, he said. Sarah swallowed. Then you know why I'm here. The man nodded. We do. And we believe you. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. You do. Another woman, middle-aged with streaks of silver in her hair, leaned forward. You're not the first person to have these visions. Sarah blinked. What do you mean? The elderly man sighed. For years, people had been seeing things. Dreams. Prophecies. Warnings. But every time someone speaks out, they're silenced. The woman nodded. We've all had our own experiences. But what you saw, it's clearer than anything we've heard before. Sarah felt a lump in her throat. She wasn't alone. She wasn't crazy. She reached into her bag, pulling out her journal. I wrote down everything, she said. Every detail, every message. The group leaned in as she opened the journal and began reading. She told them about heaven, the peace, the beauty, the warmth. She told them about the abyss, the darkness, the lost souls, the overwhelming sorrow. And she told them about the deception, the warning, the coming storm. By the time she finished, the room was silent. Then the elderly man spoke again. This message needs to reach the world, he said. Sarah exhaled, nodding. I know. But how? The woman leaned forward. They took down your account, didn't they? Sarah nodded. They erased everything. The woman exchanged glances with the others. Then we do it another way, she said. Sarah frowned. What do you mean? The elderly man smiled. You weren't meant to do this alone, Sarah. We've been preparing for this for a long time. He gestured toward a small table at the side of the room, stacked with printed papers, books, pamphlets. This isn't just a fight on the internet, he said. This is bigger than that. Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. It wasn't just her anymore. She had an army, and they were ready. Over the next few weeks, Sarah worked tirelessly with the group. They printed out flyers, booklets, articles, all spreading the message. They held meetings, discussions, secret gatherings to share what was coming. And despite all the obstacles, the message spread. People began listening. People began waking up. And Sarah knew, deep in her heart, that this was only the beginning. She had seen the deception. She had seen the warning. But she had also seen hope. And she was going to make sure the world saw it too. Sarah sat at the long wooden table in the church basement, surrounded by stacks of printed papers, handwritten notes, and old books filled with stories from people who had experienced similar visions. The air smelled faintly of old parchment and candle wax, as if this place had been a secret meeting ground for truth seekers long before she arrived. The elderly man, whom she now knew as Pastor Elijah, sat across from her, reading through her journal with deep concentration. The others in the room, 5 in total, including the nurse, watched in silence, waiting for him to speak. Finally, he closed the journal and looked up. His eyes, though filled with wisdom, also held a deep sadness. You have been given a great responsibility, Sarah, he said. But you are also in danger. Sarah nodded. She had known this for some time now. They already took down my accounts, she said. They're trying to silence me. I don't know how much time I have before they try something else. Pastor Elijah leaned forward. Then we move fast. Sarah frowned. Move fast how? The middle-aged woman, Ruth, slid a piece of paper toward Sarah. It had a list of names and locations written in neat handwriting. These are people who have been receiving the same warnings as you, she explained. They are scattered across the country, some even in other parts of the world. We've been trying to connect them, but we needed someone like you to bring it all together. Sarah scanned the names, feeling a chill run down her spine. She wasn't alone. There were others. Are they safe? She asked. Pastor Elijah hesitated. Some have disappeared. Sarah's stomach twisted. Disappeared? Vanished, Ruth clarified. One day they're warning people, the next day, no trace. No explanation. Sarah swallowed hard. She thought of the strange calls, the threats, the way her accounts had been wiped out like she never existed. Whoever was behind this wasn't just trying to stop her. They were trying to erase the message entirely. We can't let fear stop us, Pastor Elijah said. The vision you saw, the deception, it's already happening. People are walking into darkness thinking it's light. We have to warn them before it's too late. Sarah clenched her fists. Then we don't just tell them. We show them. Over the next few days, Sarah and the group worked relentlessly. They printed thousands of flyers, detailing Sarah's visions, the coming deception, and what people needed to watch for. They hacked into small forums, underground networks, and even old radio frequencies, finding any way to spread the message beyond the reach of those who were trying to erase it. Sarah recorded new videos, but this time, they were uploaded anonymously, scattered across multiple platforms so they couldn't be taken down easily. Within weeks, the movement was bigger than anything Sarah had imagined. People around the world were waking up. Some sent messages saying they had seen the same visions. Some had dreamed of Sarah's face before even knowing who she was. And some were terrified, because they had felt it too. Something was coming, and now they couldn't ignore it. But then, the warnings escalated. Sarah was walking home from the church one night when she noticed a black SUV parked near her house. The same SUV had been following her for days. She kept walking, her heart pounding, but the moment she reached her door, she heard the sound of a car door opening. She turned slowly. A man in a dark suit stood outside the vehicle, watching her. His expression was unreadable. "Sarah," he called out. She didn't answer. He took a slow step toward her. "You need to stop." Sarah forced herself to stay calm. "Who are you?" The man's face didn't change. "Someone who's trying to help you." Sarah narrowed her eyes. "By threatening me?" The man sighed. "You don't understand what you're dealing with. There are forces at play here that you cannot comprehend." Sarah took a step back, gripping her bag. "I've seen heaven. I've seen the abyss. I know exactly what I'm dealing with." For the first time, the man hesitated. Then, without another word, he turned and got back into the SUV. The vehicle sped off into the night, leaving Sarah standing there, her chest heaving. She knew now. It wasn't just about people not believing the truth. It was about people who already knew it and didn't want anyone else to. That night, Sarah didn't sleep. She wrote everything down. She sent encrypted messages to Ruth, Pastor Elijah, and the others. They had to be prepared because things were escalating fast. And then she received an email. It had no subject line, no sender information, just a single sentence. "You're running out of time." Sarah exhaled, steadying herself. "No," she whispered. "You are." She closed the laptop and picked up her journal. She had seen what was coming. She had seen what was waiting for those who fell into the deception. And no matter how hard they tried to stop her, she would make sure the world knew the truth.